Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson. We're going to conclude the text of Ecclesiastes today, chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. Then we're going to take a session just to remind ourselves of the lessons that we've learned, the hard-earned lessons, hard-earned for Solomon, hard-earned for us as the reader, that we have learned from the book of Ecclesiastes next time. And then we'll start a study of the books of 1st and 2nd Peter. We'll go back to the New Testament for a little while. Chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. The end of the matter, when all has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. This last section really begins in chapter 11, verse 9, Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, where he really starts to make his conclusion, the final conclusion. And that section is about judgment. Know for all these things God will bring you into judgment. So this larger section, this end section itself is bookended or by judgment, or it makes a circle so that where the beginning point and the end point is judgment. And as we said when we talked about that passage, judgment assumes eternity. And of course he mentions eternity in the longer section, the middle section, the main section about the aging and decay, because he talks about man going to his eternal home and the spirit returning to God who gave it. If there is nothing beyond death, then judgment is meaningless. It just is. I mean, if you're not there, what can God do to you, either to punish or to reward? So at the end, eternity comes flooding in. And this is not just under the sun. So the end of the matter. I've spent my entire life in this experiment to arrive at this answer. And it's an answer he had all along. And there's a sense of sadness in that he has squandered his life, in a sense, and his resources, trying to find an answer that was there all along, that he knew. But he had to prove it to himself, for himself, and for our own benefit, because we don't have to wonder. The experiment has been conducted, and we've watched a man with unlimited resources, unlimited power, and an unlimited ability to scrutinize and to process the information. This person has spent their life arriving at the answer of what we should do under the sun, living here. If this earthly life is all we have, what is the thing for us to do? And this book only has to be 4 verses long, but we would learn nothing if it were only 4 verses long, because there's not one of us in 1,000 that listens to the truth when it is delivered just as the truth, without having to have it proved to us somehow, either by inductive or deductive reasoning. And that's what he's done in this book. He's provided that experience for us so that this conclusion is earned. He's earned it, and we've earned it, and as being readers. The end of the matter, when we consider everything, fear God and keep his commandments. He's already talked about fearing God in chapter 5, verse 7, but that's fearing punishment and the fact that God can take vengeance at any time in this life or in the life to come. But in that passage, in this life, because we're not talking about eternity yet then. He's talking about being afraid of what God can do to you here. But this fear God is not that kind of fear. He's talking about the fear of God that he wrote about in Proverbs, which is the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom. He's talking about reverence for someone so much larger than you are in every possible way, that you are overwhelmed by that greatness. And it's frightening. It's a little frightening And I like to compare that for the Christian, when we think of God as our Father, as did David, when we think of God as our Father, um, I hope you can remember being little. And I don't remember a lot of details, but I remember the sensation of being thrown in the air by your dad, you know, and you're untethered for just that split second, but your dad's there to catch you, and he's there to throw you up again, and you have absolute trust in him. And so that's a thrilling moment. It's also a little bit scary, and that's part of the pleasure of it and part of the being thrilled by it, because this person who's completely responsible for taking care of you is big enough to do it. And there's an element of fear in that. Not, I'm afraid you're going to do me harm, but just an element of, this person is so big that I can trust that they'll take care of me. Fear God and keep his commandments. This sums everything up, and it also applies to every person. And it can be translated either way, and I think it means both things. And I'm sad that translators have to make a choice. The ESV translators make the same choice as the King James translators and say this is the whole duty of man, not this applies to every person, which is what most modern translations do. But they're both accurate. And then there's a there's a reason. God will bring every deed into judgment. This ends with judgment. It starts out under the sun and everything being pointless, and it ends by saying, no, there is a point, and there is an eternity, and we better be ready for it. And we know the answer to the question now. We're going to talk next time about the lessons that we've learned. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative, but we want to just remember them before we leave. But I hope you've enjoyed this study of the book of Ecclesiastes. It is a singular work of human literature. There's nothing like it anywhere else. Even those pieces that mimic it or take their cue from it cannot approach just the depth of it, the depth of insight, the depth of emotion, the beauty of the language, the deep darkness that it goes into, the bravery to peer down into that abyss and to enter it, to find out the experience of it. It's there's nothing else like it in all of human literature, and I hope you've enjoyed this dark ride for the most part. But we've come to the end of that dark ride, back into the sunlight, and see what is true. Okay, we'll sum up the lessons next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.